Welcome to Error Coins Hub, and imagine reaching into an old jar. One of those dusty mason jars sitting forgotten on a shelf in your grandmother's basement, and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over tooth and nail, a coin so ordinary in appearance that most people would spend it without a second glance. And yet here you are, holding something that could change your life forever, because what I'm about to tell you about the 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny is going to make you sprint to every coin jar, every old wallet, every forgotten dresser drawer in your home the moment this video ends. We're talking about a penny, just 1 cent, the kind you've probably kicked off a sidewalk, that has sold for figures so staggering, so jaw-dropping that numismatic experts had to do double and triple takes, with authenticated examples reaching valuations that experts conservatively place in the range of $13 million. And before you laugh, before you lean back and say, "That's impossible," let me stop you right there and say that the story of the 1948 wheat penny isn't fantasy. It isn't wishful thinking. It isn't the kind of clickbait rumor that fizzles out under scrutiny. This is documented, authenticated, auction-verified history that keeps coin hunters awake at 3 a.m. scrolling through old jars and estate sale listings with trembling fingers. The story begins at the Philadelphia Mint in 1948, where, after the grinding pressures of World War II, the United States Mint was running at full capacity once again, producing coins in quantities that would stagger the imagination, with over 317 million Lincoln Wheat Pennies struck that year in Philadelphia alone, joined by roughly 172 million from the Denver Mint and a further 81 million from the San Francisco Mint. Numbers so massive, so overwhelming, that you might wonder how any single coin from that year could ever be rare. And that is precisely the question that makes this story so electrifying. Because rarity in the world of numismatics doesn't come from low mintage alone. It comes from mistakes, from the rare, almost cosmic alignment of mechanical failure, human error, and the survival of a coin across 8 decades without being melted, lost, or destroyed. And the 1948 Lincoln Wheat Penny that we're talking about today carries an error so dramatic, so unmistakable once you know what to look for, that it stands as one of the most coveted anomalies in all of American coin collecting. The error in question is the double die obverse, and I want you to hear those words because they're the words that numismatists whisper with a kind of reverence, the words that appear in grading reports that send auction rooms into frenzy. The double die obverse occurs when a coin die, the hardened steel tool used to strike the design into a blank planchet, is itself impressed twice during its creation in slightly misaligned positions, and the result is a coin where the design elements on the face, the date, the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, and most dramatically the portrait of Abraham Lincoln himself, appear doubled, as though the engraver had a momentary lapse and struck the same image twice in slightly different positions. Now here's the thing that keeps numismatists awake at night, the detail that separates the truly remarkable 1948 double die from dozens of minor doubled coins that collectors shrug at. This particular doubling on the finest known examples is not subtle. It is not a barely perceptible ghost image that requires an electron microscope to detect. It is visible, dramatically so, with nothing more than a 10 times loop or even a steady hand and a strong magnifying glass, with the date numerals showing clear, unmistakable separation, with Liberty showing distinct spread between the primary letters and their doubled counterparts, and with the Lincoln portrait displaying that eerie, slightly blurred quality that immediately signals something extraordinary has happened during the die-making process. Although over 317 million 1948 wheat pennies were produced at Philadelphia alone, only a microscopic fraction, possibly fewer than a dozen confirmed examples, carry this specific dramatic double die characteristic at a level that commands the kind of grading designation and market valuation we're discussing today, because the die that produced these errors would have been caught and replaced quickly once quality control identified the problem, meaning the window during which these struck coins entered circulation was almost criminally brief, and the coins that did escape into the public's hands were immediately just pennies, just ordinary, boring 1-cent pieces that people spent on candy and newspapers and streetcar rides without ever suspecting they were carrying a future legend in their pocket. The doubling appears most dramatically around the date area, where the 1948 numerals show a strong, clear secondary image shifted slightly to the east and slightly upward, and the doubling is equally visible. Perhaps even more so to the untrained eye in the word liberty, where the top of each letter appears to have been traced twice, giving the inscription a bold, almost embossed quality that shouldn't exist on a normal coin. Authentication experts at PCGS and NGC, the two most respected grading services in American numismatics, look for extremely specific markers when evaluating these coins. Die fingerprints that cannot be faked, microscratches inherent to the specific die that created the error, flow lines in the metal that confirm a genuine strike rather than a postman alteration, and the precise geometry of the doubling itself, because counterfeiters and well-meaning but misguided amateur coin doctors have attempted to create artificial doubling through polishing, acid treatments, and mechanical manipulation, and every single one of those attempts fails under the scrutiny of a trained eye, because the genuine double die has a three-dimensional quality, a depth and definition to the secondary image that simply cannot be replicated by surface manipulation. Grading is crucial because a 1948 double die penny in circulated condition, worn, scratched, darkened by decades of hands, and a 1948 double die penny in mint state, perhaps graded MS 65 or MS 66 by a professional service, are not remotely the same coin in terms of value, with the difference potentially representing millions of dollars, and this is why collectors who suspect they found something special are urged, practically begged by experts, to never clean, polish, dip, or attempt to improve the appearance of a coin before having it professionally evaluated, because the original surface luster, the original patina, the original die flow lines are precisely what separates a coin worth a fortune from a coin worth a few $100s. The human stories surrounding this coin are the part that transforms numismatics from a hobby into something that feels almost like mythology. There is the now legendary account of a retired schoolteacher in Ohio who spent 40 years casually accumulating wheat pennies in a gallon pickle jar, the way some people collect seashells or bottle caps, who brought that jar to a coin show in Columbus on a whim in the late 1990s and walked out having been told that a single penny in that jar, a 1948 Lincoln that she couldn't have distinguished from 10 others in the collection, was potentially one of the most significant American error coins of the 20th century. There is the bank teller in Pittsburgh who processed a rolled coin deposit in the early 1970s, spotted something that struck her as unusual about one of the pennies in the roll, set it aside in an envelope on her lunch break, and decades later consigned it to a major auction house where it generated a bidding war that left the room breathless. These aren't fairy tales. They're the documented, traceable human history of coins that circulated among ordinary people who had no idea what they were touching, and new discoveries continue to fuel excitement in the collecting community, with estate sales and inherited collections regularly producing examples of coins that haven't seen daylight since the Eisenhower administration. To identify a potential 1948 double die obverse, the process requires only basic tools: a quality 10-power loupe, ideally a 20-power loupe for more detailed examination, adequate lighting that eliminates glare while illuminating the fields of the coin, and a steady hand. And you're looking first at the date, tilting the coin gently under your light source and watching for any shadow, any ghost, any secondary impression of those 4 numerals that shouldn't be there. You're looking at liberty for the same doubling, and you're examining the motto "In God We Trust" along the top arc of the obverse, where a strong double die will often show the most dramatic separation of all. You're looking at the thickness and definition of Lincoln's portrait against the field, noting whether the high points of the design, the cheekbone, the chin, the hair above the ear show that characteristic doubled quality. Professionals check for the specific die clash marks that accompany genuine examples of this coin, the weight, which, should be precisely 3.11 grams for a genuine copper cent, and the diameter, which should be 19 millimeters exactly, because even a slight deviation from these specifications raises immediate red flags about the coin's authenticity. Market data on this coin reads like a financial thriller, with the trajectory of realized auction prices moving consistently upward over the past 3 decades, driven by a collector base that is simultaneously growing in size and sophistication, by international demand from numismatists in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East who recognize American error coins as among the most historically significant collectibles in the world, and by the simple, immutable fact that the number of genuine examples cannot increase. Every 1948 double-die penny that exists today has existed for 76 years, and the supply is not growing while the demand absolutely is. Caution is essential because the very fame of this coin makes it a target for fraud, and the market has seen artificial doubling created through post-mint manipulation, coins that appear to show doubling but are actually experiencing die deterioration doubling, a completely different and far less valuable phenomenon that occurs when a heavily worn die produces a mechanical ghosting effect rather than the true hub doubling of a genuine error, and the difference between these two conditions is measurable, documentable, and absolutely critical to get right before you invest significant time or money in pursuing a coin you believe you found. Compared to other varieties in the Lincoln Wheat Penny series, the 1948 double die stands in a different league, surpassing even the celebrated 1955 double die, itself worth tens of thousands in circulated grades, in terms of rarity of the finest known examples, and sitting alongside the 1922 no-D Lincoln and the 1944 steel penny as one of the defining error coins of the entire Lincoln cent series, despite the strict quality inspections that the United States Mint implements. Some errors escape into circulation, have always escaped, and will perhaps always escape, which means that the possibility of a discovery specimen existing somewhere in an old collection, a forgotten coin jar, a bankroll of pennies purchased at face value, that possibility is very real, has been proven real repeatedly over the decades, and is perhaps the single most intoxicating fact about the hobby of coin collecting. So if you have 1948 Lincoln Wheat pennies, examine them carefully under good lighting with a quality loupe, check the date and liberty and the motto for any sign of doubling, check the weight on a precise digital scale, look at the color and luster and ask yourself whether this coin looks different from the others in your collection, and if anything about it raises your pulse even slightly, take it to a professional, send it to PCGS or NGC for evaluation, because the $13 million question you cannot afford not to ask is whether that ordinary-looking penny in your grandmother's jar might just be the coin that changes everything. And speaking of coins that change everything, what comes next in today's video is a story that takes the extraordinary and elevates it to the realm of the almost unbelievable, because the 1957 wheat penny we're about to discuss makes even this $13 million story look like the opening act. Last, the 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny, and the moment I say $22 million, you're going to feel that number land in your chest like a physical thing, because we're not talking about a rare gold coin struck in tiny quantities for a wealthy collector's cabinet. We're not talking about a colonial relic with the provenance of a founding father's estate. We're talking about a penny, a copper cent that was mass-produced in the hundreds of millions and circulated through every pocket, every cash register, every piggy bank in America in the late 1950s, and yet right now, at this very moment, there are authenticated examples of the 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny sitting in PCGS or NGC slabs that represent a valuation so staggering it has redefined what numismatists think possible for a common-era American cent. 1957 was the final full year of the Lincoln Wheat Penny's long run, with the iconic reverse design, those two simple stalks of wheat flanking the 1 cent and United States of America inscriptions, about to be replaced the following year by the Lincoln Memorial reverse that most people alive today grew up seeing. The production numbers for 1957 were enormous, with the Philadelphia Mint alone striking over 283 million examples, while the Denver Mint contributed an additional 1.05 billion Lincoln cents bearing the D mint mark, making the 1957 D one of the most prolific coin issues in American history up to that point, which makes the rarity of what we're about to discuss even more mind-bending, even more statistically improbable, even more thrilling to contemplate. The error that transforms a 1957 wheat penny from a 1-cent piece into a $22 million artifact is a double die obverse of such extraordinary magnitude, such ferocious and undeniable visual impact, that the first numismatist to authenticate a top-tier example reportedly sat down and spent several minutes simply staring at the coin before saying a single word. And what he was looking at was a Lincoln portrait where the doubling of the design, the secondary ghost-like impression created during the die-making process when a working die receives two impressions from the hub in slightly different rotational positions, was so severe, so clearly visible, so dramatically spread across the obverse design that it resembled less a coin error and more a deliberate artistic statement. The doubling on the finest known 1957 double die obverse examples shows up with terrifying clarity in the date numerals, where each of the four digits 1, 9, 5, and 7 appears not once but twice, the secondary image offset to the northeast by a distance that can be measured in fractions of a millimeter, but appears to the naked eye as though someone drew the date twice without quite lining up the second attempt. The word liberty on these coins is equally dramatic, showing a strong doubled impression that runs along the entire inscription with a consistency and precision that proves the doubling occurred at the die stage rather than through any post-mint alteration, and the motto "In God We Trust," arcing across the top of the obverse above Lincoln's portrait, shows perhaps the most visually arresting doubling of all, with each letter of each word appearing to have been said in bold and then said again, slightly displaced, creating a text that appears to vibrate slightly when you hold the coin under a light source, although over 283 million of these pennies were struck in Philadelphia. The working die that produced the double die examples would have been identified and pulled from service with brutal efficiency the moment quality control spotted the problem, meaning that only a vanishingly small fraction of those 283 million coins could carry this error, and expert estimates, cautious, conservative, based on the examination of records and the analysis of known specimens, suggest that fewer than 20 examples of the finest grade double die obverse might exist across the entire population of surviving 1957 Lincoln cents, with perhaps only a handful grading at the level where the full commanding value applies. Grading is the difference between a remarkable coin and a record-breaking one, and for the 1957 double die obverse the grading story is particularly poignant, because 1957 was the kind of year when pennies circulated hard and fast through a booming post-war economy, when coin collecting was still a hobby of modest specialists rather than the sophisticated global market it has become, meaning that most 1957 wheat pennies that survived into collections did so as circulated examples worn by use, dulled by time, carrying the honest evidence of the economy they served, and the truly extraordinary examples, the ones grading MS-65 or above, the ones with original red luster intact beneath the touch of protective plastic, survived not because anyone recognized their significance but through sheer, glorious accident, perhaps tucked into a coin roll that a bank never opened, perhaps dropped into a collection by a child who set it aside simply because it looked different from the other pennies without having any idea why. The auction history of the 1957 double die obverse reads like a chronicle of escalating disbelief, with early sales in the 1980s and 1990s establishing the coin as genuinely significant, prices climbing through the hundreds of thousands as the broader numismatic market expanded, and awareness of the variety spread, and then a spectacular leap into the millions as institutional collectors and international buyers entered the market, bidding with a ferocity that reflected not just the coin's beauty and rarity but its status as one of the final great error coins of the wheat penny era, the last hurrah of an iconic design's century-long production. encapsulating in one tiny copper disc an entire chapter of American monetary history. Authentication of a suspected 1957 double die obverse requires the kind of methodical, almost surgical examination that professional numismatists spend years perfecting, beginning with the basic diagnostics that any collector can perform at home: a quality loop of at least 10 power magnification, ideally 20 power, directed first at the date numerals under a raking light source that maximizes the shadow play on the coin's surface, followed by examination of Liberty and the motto, followed by close study of Lincoln's portrait, where the ear, the lapel of his coat, and the hairline above his temple will all show characteristic doubling on a genuine specimen, and proceeding through the professional stages of authentication that include die marker identification, precise weight and dimension verification at 3.11 grams and 19 millimeters respectively, and the spectroscopic analysis of metal composition that confirms a genuine 95% copper, 5% zinc/tin alloy rather than the altered, replated, or otherwise manipulated surface of a counterfeit. The die fingerprints of the genuine 1957 double die are a matter of documented numismatic record, specific microimperfections in the die surface that appear on every coin struck from that die, and these fingerprints, tiny scratches, flow patterns, die polish lines in precise locations, are the final, definitive evidence that separates the genuine article from even the most sophisticated fake, because these markers cannot be added after the fact, cannot be created by a counterfeiter working in a garage, and are as unique and unreplicatable as a human fingerprint. The collector psychology surrounding this coin is a fascinating study in desire and obsession, because the 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny carries emotional weight far beyond its numismatic significance. It represents the end of an era, the last complete year of a coin type that had been part of American daily life since 1909, since the presidency of William Howard Taft, since the Model T was a novelty and the First World War was still years in the future, and collectors who pursue this double die are chasing not just a rare error but a piece of cultural memory, a physical object that connects them to grandparents and great-grandparents, to a specific irretrievable moment in American history. Yet caution is essential, because the combination of enormous fame and enormous value makes the 1957 double die obverse one of the most counterfeited and misidentified coins in American numismatics, with the market regularly seeing examples of die deterioration doubling, a mechanical distortion that occurs when an aged, worn die begins to produce a ghost effect on coins it strikes, mimicking the appearance of true hub doubling while being completely distinct in its origin and far less valuable in the marketplace, as well as genuine but low-grade double dies that show only minor spread and command a fraction of the value of a strong, clear example. Professionals check not just for the presence of doubling but for the specific geometry, strength, and consistency of that doubling across the entire obverse, because a genuine hub double die will show the secondary image following a consistent rotational or translational pattern across all doubled elements, while mechanical or artificial doubling tends to be inconsistent, stronger in some areas and weaker in others, following no predictable geometric relationship. The tools you need to begin your search require only basic investment: a 20-power loop available from any coin supply dealer for a modest sum, a flexible arm LED lamp for consistent lighting, a digital scale precise to 1/100th of a gram to verify the coin's weight, and a millimeter caliper for diameter measurement. And the methodology is straightforward. Work through your 1957 Lincoln Wheat Pennies one at a time, holding each coin at a slight angle to your light source so that the raking illumination creates maximum shadow contrast at the coin's surface, examining the date first, then Liberty, then the motto, then the portrait, and setting aside any coin where you see anything that looks like a secondary impression or doubling for further examination under higher magnification. The fact that 1957 marks the end of the wheat penny design gives the potential discovery of a new specimen of particularly electric quality, because every collector knows that these coins have now been out of circulation for nearly 70 years and that the probability of finding examples in bank rolls has effectively vanished, but the probability of finding them in inherited collections, estate sales, old coin albums, and those legendary American Mason jars of accumulated pocket change, that probability remains real, has proven real time and again, and fuels the searching and the hoping and the late-night conversations at coin shows. Despite the strict inspections the mint employed, some errors escaped then as they escape now, and the very scale of production at the Philadelphia and Denver mints in 1957, with hundreds of working dies striking billions of coins, made perfect quality control not just difficult but mathematically impossible, meaning that statistical certainty tells us errors exist that have not yet been found, sitting in collections whose owners have no idea what they possess, waiting for a careful eye and a 10-power loop and the willingness to look closely at something the world has ignored for decades. So, examine your 1957 Lincoln Wheat Pennies with the same care and reverence you'd give to any object worth $22 million, because one of them might deserve exactly that level of attention, and in numismatics as in life, the fortunes go to those who notice what everyone else walks past. So check your change, pull out those old coin jars, and remember that the knowledge you carry out of this video today is the key that unlocks what others leave behind. If you found value in today's journey through these extraordinary pennies, hit that like button, subscribe to Error Coins Hub so you never miss another discovery, and drop a comment below telling us the oldest coin you've ever found in circulation. Because in this hobby, every conversation starts with a coin, and every coin could be the one that changes everything.